Thank you to everyone joining us today from across the country and around the world. I'm Michael Higgs, the Virtual Programs Manager here at Conscious Capitalism. And on behalf of the team, we appreciate you taking time to learn and grow in community with us. Today, we're very excited to be sharing space with Christy Smith. As many of you know, Conscious Capitalism is a global community of CEOs, presidents, founders, board members, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from diverse industries, backgrounds, and perspectives who are committed to the shared purpose of elevating humanity through business. Several times a month, we offer virtual gatherings like this one as a way for the community to see how this philosophy takes shape in the leadership journeys and business practices of those in our network. And now today, excuse me, about today's gathering. Dr. Christy Smith, a renowned advisor to Fortune 500 companies and a leading voice on the future of work, offers a compelling vision in her new book, Essential: How Distributed Teams, Generative AI, and Global Shifts Are Creating a New Human-Powered Leadership. With over 35 years of experience, including global leadership roles at Deloitte, Apple, and Accenture, she brings unparalleled expertise in leadership, organizational design, and talent management. She's been featured in publications like the New York Times and the Harvard Business Review. And she's the founder of the Humanity Studio, a research and advisory institute dedicated to improving the way we live by revolutionizing the way we work. In Essential, she and her co-author, Kelly Monahan, explore the critical intersection of technology, human skills, and leadership in the modern age. And we're going to delve into some of those topics today. Just a few housekeeping details. I will be in conversation with Christy for about 25 to 35 minutes roughly. And then we're going to save the last 10 to 15 minutes for questions from the audience. But I encourage you to add any questions that you do have. Just add them to chat, and I'll circle back on those questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. Christy, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Wonderful.
And everyone, actually. It's fabulous
Yeah,
to see
yeah,
all joining.
indeed, indeed. So I want to start out just with one of the key themes of your book, the notion of human-centered leadership. And the first question I want to ask you is, how has the focus on leadership evolved over time? And what are these key factors that have led to the current need for this human-powered leadership?
Yeah, great question. Let's talk about the time we're in, because it's really unprecedented when you think about leaders and the time that we're living in. Leadership is hard. It's really hard today. And when you look at the factors that are making it so difficult, you think about things like the advances in technology and AI and the skills shortage and skill scarcity that we have. You think about wars in two places, in Europe and in the Middle East. You think about this polarization in the narrative that's happening not just here in the US, but globally. You think about the headwinds of employee engagement. Employee engagement is at an all-time low across the globe, and lack of trust in leadership is at an all-time low. So we're really operating in, and that's not to say that climate on top of that and DEI efforts on top of that are just complicating it more. And so when you think about that, the environment we're in, the emphasis for leaders has shifted from being technical experts to needing to be more human leaders. And we define that based on, what our research tells us are the priorities of employees today. And there are four. And these priorities are expectations that they have of leaders: purpose, agency, well-being, and connection. Those are all very human needs. And so, so this is the perfect storm to talk about what's needed and a whole shift in leadership.
Wonderful. I want to actually jump to the notion of purpose and its need within organizations. You're speaking to a community of conscious capitalists.
Yeah.
One of our tenets is higher purpose, and
Yeah.
it really emphasizes that businesses should exist for a purpose beyond profit, right?
Hmm.
And you discuss how embedding purpose within organizations, both is inspirational, but it's also a talent retention strategy. So
100%.
yeah, so
Yeah.
given this, how do you think about leaders and how should they define or communicate a higher purpose that both resonates within their organization, but also for external stakeholders?
Yeah. I'm going to talk about a couple of things in context to answering that question. Number one, we talked to over 600 CEOs globally. And the number one thing that they know that they have to develop a competency around is transparency.
Mm,
Transparency of the mission, of the purpose of the organization. Number two, if you think about the performance context of any organization, it starts with purpose. Why do we exist?
mhm,
Right? Not just from that profit driven standpoint, but profit via purpose, right? The whole shift to profit via purpose is critical. Purpose then in the performance contract context leads to how do you develop your strategy?
mhm,
And strategy leads to culture. And culture leads to op model. And op model leads to what are the skills that I need and the leaders that I need to execute on all of this.
mm,
So everything in business is anchored to purpose. What
mm,
employees are looking for in our research is A, companies' insides match their outsides, that if they say they are purpose driven, if they have a purpose strategy, that they live to that purpose, right? I mean, we all know, and I've had the good pleasure of working as a consultant to J&J for many, many years. Their credo statement is their purpose statement.
mm,
Everything they do in policies and procedures, in building leadership standards, in working with clients, in working for the patient is anchored in the credo.
mm,
It's throughout their entire organization. It's not just etched in stone at their entrance, right?
mm, mhm,
So what employees are looking for is that exact standard that J&J has
mm,
is, do our insides match our outsides?
mhm,
And so where companies are exposed is where that's not happening,
mm,
right? And given the advent of social media, it makes it very easy for prospective employees or employees to really dig deep on what the realities are in terms of that
indeed.
purpose. And it's
Mhm,
not just employees, it's your customers, because
mm,
people are making decisions on where they buy and who they buy from based on, does that company live to its purpose and values?
mhm, mhm. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
You do a wonderful job in the beginning of the book, kind of detailing, going actually all the way back to the Industrial Revolution.
Yep.
Um, and they're what I might define more as productivity-based leadership
Yeah.
or input output, right? Make the car. How many cars are we making in the example of Ford?
Yeah. Word. Yeah.
So as uh what are some of the key steps as we transition from some of these more traditional leadership models, perhaps productivity based, to more of these human power leadership models or approaches? What challenges might leaders encounter as they kind of pivot from this old way of doing things to what is needed now?
Yeah, we purposefully at the beginning of the book do a little bit of a history lesson,
Mhm,
right? Because it's really important for us to understand globally what our experiences have been and what the relationship between employer and employees has been, and
mhm,
how that has shifted things like performance of a company, productivity of a company, innovation, all of these things. So when you look at the Ford example, it's that wonderful phrase, cogs in a wheel, right? Ford did not necessarily care about their employees. They were making sure, that they were running the machines, they were building the cars and stuff. Now, I'm probably unfair by saying they didn't care. What they wanted to make sure that they did do is provide those kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that lower rung of the benefits and pay. But beyond that, we didn't necessarily look at individuals as the humans they are coming into a context of work.
Mhm.
Um, that has dramatically changed today for all the reasons that I talked about that make leadership hard. Is there is a level of expectation of employees on where, when, and how they are going to work, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And they have more choice. And so, we used to talk about talent acquisition. It's really not about talent acquisition anymore. It's about talent access. And how do I access the right skills and the right capabilities to run my organization? And that looks different today. That could be through an employee, that
Mhm.
could be from a fractional worker, that could be from an ecosystem partner. It can
Mhm.
look very differently today. And so the role of the leader isn't necessarily being the technical expert anymore. It's about how do I manage this dynamic group of people
Mhm.
and ways to get the product done, reach growth goals, all that. How do I bring that together and architect a team that is doing the work that they feel is meaningful to the purpose and the values and to the clients or the customers? How do I understand the ever increasing demands of skills and technology and how that's impacted? And how do I teach people? How do
Mhm.
I build learning into our schedules every day? Because I'll tell you what, if your schedule is like mine, it's back to back to back to back, right? We
Indeed.
have to slow down and make opportunity and space for learning and development, upskilling and reskilling. And we have to understand that our employees are coming to work in context of their life. They're not checking their humanity at the door.
Mm, mm. I do want to just jump back to the automotive example because you do a great job of highlighting Toyota, right?
Yeah.
Was um, I mean, there was almost a manufacturing revolution, right? Where Toyota leadership decided to actually listen to frontline workers,
That's
those that
right.
were actually
Do
building vehicles, deep listening of what those needs truly were. And then, of course, you look now and the reliability, the quality, and the success of that brand. Um, I want to jump quickly to something that another key theme in the book is the notion of just this skills scarcity, and how
Mhm,
what we're entering now is more of what I think you characterize as a skills economy, uh,
mhm.
which does challenge those traditional notions of skill acquisition, talent acquisition, and development. Can you talk a little bit about that massive shift that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, what is creating this massive shift is innovation and technology.
Hmm.
How do we think about the marriage between artificial intelligence and human intelligence? And
Hmm.
how do we bring those together? And so one of the things that we examined really closely is what does this mean to the structure of the workplace itself? If organizations today and don't have the right skills and can't keep up with the right technologies, well, they will lag, right, in growth.
Hmm.
And so what it shifts the workplace to say is how do I access the right skills um, in real time
Hmm.
to execute on the demands of my business and productivity and all of that? That doesn't look like necessarily a full-time employee anymore,
Right.
right? As I said earlier, one of the fastest growing segments of our economy is the fractional worker or the freelancer.
Hmm.
Fastest growing. Now that's for a couple of reasons. One, people don't want to be part of necessarily organizations they don't think live up to their purpose, but they may want to do projects that live to the customer betterment of the customer or the
Hmm.
client. And so they're making choices that way to be freelance or fractional. Or it's that they want to be able to have a variety of opportunities
Hmm.
to work on projects or work on outcomes for an organization. So this notion, and that coupled with the half-life of skills shortening and shortening and shortening, means that there is a supply and demand issue here. And so employers, the last part I'll say is employers are not emphasizing or making time for their employees to be upskilled, period. And
Yeah.
because of that, they're requiring them to do it side of desk. And that is not going to help them meet their growth goals ultimately.
Well, and I want to highlight a data point that you bring up in the book. You say that by 2030, technological disruption will equate to a talent shortage
Yep,
of 85 million people. And get this, audience, cost the global economy an estimated 8.5 trillion. That's with a T.
yep,
So this is obviously very real. And the other thing I want to just circle back on is you also highlight the reticence within current leadership to source talent from freelance or contractors. This is this is purely from memory, but I think you said 69% of leadership is actually reticent to going outside of the organization for
that's
that
right.
talent. So,
That's right. That's right. I mean, leaders today have grown up, people who are in power are more late Xers and boomers, right? So
mhm,
they've grown up with this concept of loyalty, which, listen, I grew up with that, right? Loyalty is, I'm like a golden retriever, right? But
same.
so I think that this dynamic that's happening with leaders who are in positions of power being, later in age, they don't believe that working with fractional workplaces or workers rather, or freelancers engenders the same kind of loyalty.
Mhm.
And it would mean for them to really structure work fundamentally differently than they structure work today. And that, is daunting, right? It also would require that they actually understand in depth the technological advances that are happening and the implications of those technologies on their business, and be, frankly, experts themselves on how that impacts the kind of talent that they need.
I want to jump to a related question. And so I'm just going to answer your question, Michelle. The best place for questions is you can go ahead and drop them into chat. I'll circle back on those. Um, you touched on this a little bit, but Christy, how can leaders create a culture that sort of embraces this flexibility of work-life integration, and moving more from kind of those traditional notions that you're describing,
Mhm.
um, to one where employees feel more supported or valued in kind of these um,
Yeah.
looser structures?
Yeah. So good question. And I see Sarah's question, just that relates to the talent shortage and disruption in the job market. So just really quickly, Sarah, I saw that and I wanted to answer it. So what we proposed through all the research that we did in the development of the book, and really looking at, I mean, what this book does uniquely is it looks at all of those headwinds that I talked about at the beginning of our discussion that leaders are facing, looks at complex, those complex issues and managing those complex issues in total. You know, we are many sources today are just looking at AI or just looking at global shifts or just looking at distributed teams or RTO. We really wanted to look at the totality of this system and these headwinds and provide an answer. What we found in our research is that we need a new type of leadership, and that leadership we call the emotionally mature leader. If you think about the natural progression of, we've all fallen in love with emotional intelligence for very good reason, because it's a way for us to begin to understand what our proclivities are, right? How empathetic are we? You know, how caring are we? All of these things. Emotional intelligence is really important, and it is a precursor to what we call emotional maturity. Our workplaces need to move. While emotional intelligence is all about me, emotional maturity is all about the humans that I work with.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's this shift from me focus to other focus. It's this shift, and the qualities associated with it are, number one, a mindset of suspension of self-interest. It's not about me. It's actually about the people that I'm working with, my team members, my colleagues, my customers, my clients. We must shift from this all about me getting what I need or I want, to really focus on the other. Secondly, the requirements of behaviorally of an emotionally mature leader and suspension of self is a capability and competency to ask questions, to be insatiably curious about the other, right? Or the problem that we need to solve within the organization. It's taking the time, which doesn't occur back-to-back meetings. It's actually making the space and the time to really learn the motivations of your employees, how you construct your team and architect your team for greater productivity, greater engagement, and greater outcomes. It's how you develop the capability of curiosity when you interact with such technologies as AI. AI is only as good as the questions I ask it and how I discern the answers, right? Then lastly, it's how do you architect that culture around that team to build productivity, build movement, build, growth, all of that. And then how do you provide the learning and development that people need? That's an emotionally mature leader. And that's what our research suggests is what is needed at this time.
Thank you. I want to dig into that notion of just the emotionally mature leader a little bit. We at Conscious Capitalism, when we talk about conscious culture, we posit that leaders should be value driven,
Mhm,
ethical.
mhm.
Those behaviors foster a culture of trust and collaboration and innovation. Um, you say in the book that soft skills are now the power skills. So I'm wondering, you touched on this a little bit, but any other suggestions that you have around how leaders can either develop or demonstrate that
Yep.
emotional maturity and kind of prioritize some of those softer skills?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a conference probably a year and a half ago with Satya Nadella was a guest, and he was speaking in an interview. And he talked about human skills are the new power skills. And he emphasizes empathy, which he is very clearly committed to building within Microsoft. And that is actually resident by the time and the calendars to take to meet with other people, the encouragement to listen. How do I listen with intent, right? How do I be present, right? To either conversations. I mean, how many times have you been in a conversation with a leader that you asked a question to, or they're asking you a question and your watch is going off and you're checking email and all of that? Nothing, hampers trust or care or commitment than being distracted like that. So this notion of being absolutely present, the
Mm,
quality of contextual competence is a power skill.
mm,
Understanding the context in which people come to work. Are they dealing with a child who is autistic or ADHD and is having trouble at school? Or are they dealing with a parent, an aging parent? Do they have family members in the Middle East? Are they feeling discriminated against? Understanding the context in which our employees show up at work and our teammates show up at work
Mhm.
is a real skill that we need to develop and is a power skill.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things that leaders need to do.
Yeah, and I do want to highlight for the audience, you referred a number of times as sort of asking questions, right?
Yeah.
Insatiable curiosity. But I believe you also say, keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
How are you? Where
Yeah.
did you grow up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Distill it down to open that door, right?
100%. It's so funny. There's so many times, certainly when I was a DEI leader, but also in my entire career, when you're talking about performance conversations and things like that, that leaders have said to me, I don't know how to talk to, if they're a male, I don't know how to talk to her. Or if they have, one of their employees is diverse. Well, what do I say? And it's always stunning to me when someone says that. And I often reply, well, what would you say to them if you were sitting next to them at a kid's soccer game? Or what would you say to them at, a dinner party? This notion that we have to separate our humanity when we are at work, and that conversations aren't just about getting to know each other, they're about, and it makes difficult conversations much easier when you actually know the person,
Indeed,
right?
when that foundation's there.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And so many, don't. That's why the conversation around performance becomes difficult, or conversation about, hey, what are you doing on the job becomes difficult because you don't even know who you're talking about. So start simply with, hey, how are you? Where'd you grow
Mhm,
up?
mhm.
How many siblings do you have? And if someone doesn't want to reveal those things, then work harder to say, tell me about your project. Tell
Yeah,
me what's going on at work. What are you facing that's difficult? What can I help you with?
wonderful. Um, I do want to jump to just a few practical recommendations. Um, you suggest, I'm going to highlight two here. Master your calendar. And one of my favorites, this almost feels like a call to adventure. Take walks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that there are, you know, unbelievable, easy things to do, not only to build your own resilience as a leader, because it is hard, but also to role model for your team and to engage your team fundamentally differently.
Mhm,
The notion of taking a walk, I've been very fortunate in the jobs that I've had or the clients that I've had that, taking them for walks and, and talking about an issue or talking about a problem actually brings faster resolution than
mhm,
if we were sitting in an office with a table, between us or next to us. You know what I mean?
mhm,
So taking walks, pausing. When somebody is talking to you and offering position and you have a knee-jerk reaction that they're wrong, or that you could tell them how to do it better, pause.
mm,
And instead of giving your opinion, ask more questions, right? I
mm,
think listening is really important. Listening not only to your employees, but to yourself. If you are exhausted, if you are tired, if you are mentally, strained, change your circumstances just in that moment. And it
mm,
doesn't have to be for, hours on end. It could be 5 minutes. Just go sit quietly somewhere or whatever, maybe you are working from home, go for a run.
mm,
Whatever you can do to interrupt that kind of push, 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 exhaustion, temper, whatever it is, pause.
mm, mm. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Um, Want to jump to a question. You draw a parallel in the book between our current era and the Renaissance era.
Yeah.
Um, If you were painting a modern Mona Lisa of leadership, what would that look like?
Boy, I haven't had that question. That's a great question. So let me just give context to the audience. So we start the book by talking about the golden age, the Renaissance after the Black Plague. The Black Plague ravaged Europe. And so coming out of that horrible pandemic itself, there was this emphasis on humanism
Mm,
and this emphasis on, art, science, music, economies, all of these kinds of things. And it was an explosion of innovation. We draw that parallel to coming out of our own pandemic in modern days. There has been an explosion of all of those things, right?
indeed.
And so, I think if I were to paint the picture of what that would look like, it would be human empowerment.
Mm, mhm.
It would be maybe a rocket ship, you know,
Okay.
maybe it would be a sports team,
Mhm,
and emulating some great sports team. It may be a yoga pose. It would be many things,
mm,
right? Because I think that we have to embrace our own humanity, no matter
mm,
what that looks like.
mm,
And only in doing so can we then endeavor to understand someone else's humanity.
mm. Thank you. I do want to make sure we get time for some questions here, and there have been a few popping in the chat.
Mhm.
Uh, I'll start with a question from Shiri, and my apologies if that's a mispronunciation, but how do we help managers develop the power skills that you refer to?
Yeah, I think that this is needs a intervention, right? This means their own learning and development. I believe that, we are not, and this is a bigger issue than your direct question, but we're not educating, in our undergraduate programs or our graduate programs, the emphasis on human leadership and what is required to manage in this complex time. So in lieu of that, we need to assess leaders' capabilities. We need to have individual interventions and coaching for those individuals.
Mhm,
We need to direct them to meaningful education, whether that's online or whether that's working with whatever it is. We absolutely need to intervene, and that intervention needs to be based on on each individual and how they learn.
mhm, mhm. Wonderful. Let's see. We have another question here from Laura, and she asks, how does your research reveal underlying mindsets that prohibit leaders from making the shifts?
Well, in order to do really good research, you've got to look at what's not working, right? And certainly, so let me give you a direct, example that we talk about in the book. When you think about how Airbnb and Travis came to power, I'm building Airbnb, and his behavior became so untenable because of his spending habits, because of his own greed, because of his treatment of women in particular, and just his how enamored he was with himself really put that company in danger, right? To the point where the board had to remove him, right? And then, obviously have a great leader in Airbnb today who's very quite different. And if you listen to Brian on podcasts, you can see what a human leader he is. So, we did look at the dark side of this, and certainly that kind of, yeah, I mean, in recent press, right? You look at Mark Zuckerberg's comments around needing more masculinity in the workforce. Well, that, led to huge disengagement around certainly women. The parodies that are showing up are quite funny in response to that. So we absolutely looked at the dark side of this to get to, what leaders, when you look at leaders who are more emotionally mature, their companies are 3 to 6 times greater growth and greater revenue than those who are not.
Hmm. I want to jump in with a question. And audience, feel free to continue to add. Uh, Thank you, Karen. I see you've ordered Christie's book already.
Thank you.
Excellent. I want to jump back to you talk about a $1 trillion economic hit from women leaving leadership roles.
Mhm.
What's your message to CEOs who are not taking this seriously?
Well, listen, I think that the whole rhetoric today and the movement away from DEI efforts by many companies, excuse me, is really frightening.
Mhm.
Um, I think that it's short-sighted. I think it's pandering to the current administration, and I think that we will see the economic um, uh, results of that being continuing to be extremely costly. When you look at that, more than half of our population are women and people of color. And by the way, people of color, this is hundreds of times worse. Then you're disengaging more of those individuals who will be less productive at work, less trustful at work, less inclined to innovate, less inclined to collaborate. And so, it's the companies like, I'm very proud of Apple for what they've done, Costco, JP Morgan, the commitment to double down on DEI efforts and double down on understanding that this is a key to growth and innovation is, I think, just incredible. And we need more of that. As we look to the private sector leadership to solve for humanity more than we look to our governments globally, I think we will see that those who choose to be on the right side of history will be, their companies will continue to grow and be more sustainable than those who don't.
Thank you for that. Michelle, I want to make sure I believe that Christy touched on your question again around how to do this work um, without necessarily calling it DEI. I mean,
Yep.
perhaps giving
Well,
consideration to this political landscape that we're in now.
I think we call it DEI, and I mean, I'm never going to stop using those phrases. I think what we do with it, and how we create that in culture starts with leadership. It's not, you cannot abdicate this work to a DEI officer or to a CHRO with little resources and little money. You just simply can't. That's been a failed strategy forever, right? We do need to make it the responsibility of every single leader, and we need to get them to prioritize it and therefore measure them for that prioritization. I've worked with many leaders on this issue, and every one of them will say, yeah, I deeply care about this, but it's, priority 10 on on a whole list of things. If we can't incent to get that to be priority 1 and create leaders who are emotionally mature and will put this at the first on their list or second on their list, then we're not going to see progress.
Thank you. Um, I want to just capture some of your intellect and passion as I heard you answering that question.
Yeah.
Throw one more out to you. Um, you have 60 seconds alone with every CEO in America. What's the urgent wake-up call you would give them?
Write your obituary.
Mm,
I mean, I honestly, I mean, I work with a lot of leaders. What do you want your legacy to be?
mm.
and really push on them. This isn't just a fluff exercise. This is really pushing on them. I
Mm,
have worked with so many leaders who get 4 years out from retirement, and all of a sudden it's like they get religion and they're like, I want my legacy to be people and what remembered for being caring and mentoring people and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you're 4 years out from your career and you've been a jerk. So I think when I spend time with leaders, I mean, literally coaching leaders, the first thing I do is ask them to write their leadership obituary.
mm, wow. I'm curious about that. What are there themes that come up? It's just so provocative.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there are themes that, I spent way too much time worrying about the advancement of my career.
Mhm,
I spent way too much time, barking orders,
mhm,
way little time spending with employees at all levels. I played politics way too much.
mm,
I created politics,
mm.
right? All of these things are kind of themes that I hear.
Wow. I I might say that as a broad brushstroke, they've almost forfeit their humanity.
Yeah. No, I
At
think that's
your
true. And
Yeah,
they say, I mean, the most prevalent one is, I didn't spend enough time with my family. I missed too many things.
yeah, yeah.
Well, if
Um,
you missed too many things, how responsible were you for others missing things?
mm, okay. Well, thank you, Christy, for this conversation. Insightful. You offered some actionable insights to our audience. I do want to include in the chat here, just quickly, a link. We were chatting before. Congratulations. I'm going to say this publicly. Congratulations to Christy. Her book is temporarily unavailable on Amazon. It's out of stock due to its success. But I included a link there where you're able to get it through a couple other booksellers. So if you feel the call, that's the website that's dedicated for the book. You can learn a little bit more. I also just want to quickly drop into chat a short survey. It does help inform how these conversations take shape and those that we bring in to have said conversations with. Um, Christy, final question for you. How can people stay in touch, find out about your latest thinking? LinkedIn?
Yeah, certainly LinkedIn. I also started my own company called The Humanity Studio. So you can go to thehumanitystudio.com and learn what we're up to. I have a newsletter that I publish. So I, welcome you to stay in touch both ways.
Wonderful. I just have to say that the humanities do, I saw that name and you nailed it.
Thank you.
Such a
Thank you.
great name. Such a great name.
Yeah.
I see a couple compliments here. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Vinard. And yeah, just Christy, one final thank you to you and to our audience, those that joined, for your questions. Um, and yeah, wishing everyone a great rest of your week. Christy, continued success with the book. And
Thank
thanks for
you.
speaking with our audience today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you and your audience. This has been terrific. And let's do the great work of solving for humanity in the workplace together.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Have
All
a great
right. Thanks.
bye
Bye.
bye.